So I've been on a bit of a Resident Evil kick lately. I played through Resident Evil 5 and 6 in co-op last year with my friend, and I played Resident Evil 2 Remake early this year and absolutely loved the shit out of it. And with Resident Evil Village coming soon, though I guess by the time this video is out it will have released, I figured it's time I finally try out Resident Evil 7, and I'm glad I did because I really liked it for the most part. Be warned, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't played the game for yourself and plan to someday, it might be best to come back later. Obviously the switch to first person is the most noticeable change from the other games, but unless you're playing in VR, which I absolutely did not, it still very much feels like a Resident Evil game, at least the more modern ones that I've played. You still gotta manage your inventory constantly, there's puzzles to solve, even if they're a bit on the easier side, and of course you've got some monsters to kill. After the disaster that was Resident Evil 6, they thankfully went back to the slower, more horror-focused approach, and that was definitely for the better. I love the old Louisiana mansion setting, though it was smaller than I was expecting, but it's an absolutely terrifying environment to explore, especially when you've got Jack Baker stalking you through it. RE7 is probably one of the scariest games I've ever played, and that first-person perspective definitely lends to that. Things can get right in your face out of nowhere since you've got more limited sight lines than if it was in third person, and I had one jump scare genuinely scare the shit out of me. I guess one of the major problems is that the Bakers were generally the only terrifying part about the game. Jack was definitely intimidating and could take you out pretty quickly, and his first boss fight took me a number of tries to figure out what to do, which I didn't mind as it was a pretty unique fight, and it started out with a 10 out of 10 kill. But Marguerite was the truly terrifying one, even before she transformed into her more monstrous form. Her popping out of a corner is the jump scare that got me, and her boss fight kept me on edge the entire time as she could crawl out of the darkness from anywhere as you frantically ran around. That said, Lucas only ever annoyed me as you dealt with his trap-laden area. He's a weird dude for sure, but I would never say he was actually scary. Other than the Bakers, you're stuck just fighting these monsters called the Molded for most of the game, and they get real old real fast. There's a few variations in the types you fight, but they're mostly the same and just weren't scary past the first couple. And I hate that Capcom just went back to the goopy monster design that I think RE5 and 6 leaned on too much. Even Jack Baker devolves into this. His first two fights were fun and intimidating as you were stuck in small rooms with him, and you even get a chainsaw for the second fight. But then his last fight is just a giant goop monster with a bunch of big glowing eyes that you gotta shoot, something that's been done to death in Resident Evil. This extends to the story too. It starts out very intriguing as you, as Ethan Winters, are looking for your wife Mia, who you haven't seen in years. Eventually you track her down to the Baker mansion, and though you find her early on, she becomes sort of possessed and tries killing Ethan. He eventually makes his way out of the mansion, and with help from Zoe Baker, who doesn't seem as crazy as the rest of her family, finds a cure for what ails the Bakers. This leads to the first issue I have, where you have to choose to cure Mia, your freaking wife, or Zoe, who you've just met. And if you actually are stupid enough to choose Zoe, you get the bad ending because you deserve it. This choice seems so pointless when the obvious good one that I'm sure 90% of people chose gets you the good ending. Kinda reminds me of the endings in Far Cry 3. Eventually you find out that all this chaos was caused by a genetically modified girl obsessed with having a family that can control the mold that infected the Bakers, and how Mia was connected to her. It's a good premise, but again, it just devolves into a giant goop monster for the final fight, and it just betrays any horror sentiments the game had going. And look, I get that I've been ragging on the game, but I did actually really enjoy it for at least the first 2/3 of the game. When it sticks to the horror, it's incredibly intense and is where the game shines. One aspect I really appreciated were the VHS segments that helped tell a bit of backstory while also teaching you about areas that Ethan was about to encounter. I especially loved the party room puzzle segment, as what you learn from this VHS is vital to keeping Ethan alive later on. But it starts to go back to tropes from the series that I wish they'd just move past, and I don't think the story held up as well as it could have. Though it definitely had its moments, like when Ethan has to talk to Jack in his uninfected form. I also tried out the Not a Hero DLC, where you play as Chris Redfield as he hunts down Lucas Baker after the events of the main game. It's short, but it's free, so I can't complain, and the shotgun in it was immensely satisfying to use. It's definitely worth trying out. And those were my quick thoughts on Resident Evil 7. I had my complaints, but I'm still pretty excited to try out Resident Evil Village and see where it goes from here. I know the game's out, but as of publishing this video, I haven't gotten it yet. But when I do get it and I finish it, I'll be sure to do another quick thoughts on it. Be sure to let me know what you thought of this new format. I plan on doing these in between my regular reviews, and they'll be shorter videos of me just talking about the games I've been playing recently, whether they're new releases or older games from my backlog or just games I've been replaying. If you haven't seen my previous reviews, you can check them out in this playlist here. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing and check me out on Twitter at Nebulowl. Until next time, have a good one. See ya!